Costa is brought to you by FQM Trident Limited, a subsidiary of First Quantum Minerals Limited.
Good evening, Zambia. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on this exclusive edition of Costa. My name is Andrew Mwansa, sitting in for Costa Mwansa. Kenneth Kaunda Day is a Zambian public holiday celebrated annually on April 28th. It commemorates the birth anniversary of the first president of Zambia. Kenneth Kaunda was born on April 28th, 1914 in the British Protectorate of Northern Rhodesia. After receiving education, he worked as a teacher for a number of years before embarking on a political career. In 1948, Kaunda became a co-founder of the Northern Rhodesia Congress, renamed the African National Congress in 1951, the first African political party in Northern Rhodesia. 2 years later, white settlers established the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. Kaunda and the ANC president, Harry Nkombula, tried to mobilize native Africans against the Federation, but their efforts weren't particularly successful. In 1955, Kaunda and Nkombula spent 2 months in jail after getting arrested for the distribution of subversive literature. Upon their release, they drifted apart as Nkombula adopted more liberal views and Kaunda became more radical. Eventually, Kaunda and his supporters split from the ANC and founded the Zambia African Congress in 1958. The new party was banned 5 months later and Kaunda spent another 5 months in prison. After being released, he became president of the United National Independence Party that had been founded by Mwansa and other former ZANC members. Following the 1962 general elections in Northern Rhodesia, the United National Independence Party and the African National Congress formed a coalition government where Kaunda was Minister of Local Government and Social Welfare. In December of 1963, the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland was dissolved and new elections were held in Northern Rhodesia, and in January of 1964, Kaunda's party won elections and he became Prime Minister of Northern Rhodesia. On October 24, 1964, Northern Rhodesia declared its independence and became the Republic of Zambia, with Kaunda as its first president. Tonight, we discuss the impact of Kaunda's presidency. We also look at the impact he had on Zambia's health sector. My guest tonight is former Health Minister, Dr. Chitalu Chilufya. Doc, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on Costa tonight.
Good evening, Andrew, and thank you for having me. Good evening, viewers.
Well, thank you so much to those that are joining us on channel 271 on DSTV and channel 20 on GOTV. But if you're being not shaded, you're catching us live on our Facebook live feed, Diamond TV Zambia. We'll be reading your comments and contributions via that platform. Also, later on, we'll be opening the phone lines. Please come through and make your contributions regarding the topic that we have on the table tonight. It's been a long time, Doc. Many are saying that you've been elusive, and many are suggesting that perhaps you've abandoned your political project of becoming Zambia's next president because you've been so quiet.
Well, Andrew, I'll answer you using some proverbs. Omuswemo kosef pa kulambe shila, meaning that snake, for it to have a longer lifespan, stronger spine, it darts and watches what's happening around. Ichambeshi kuipitila kula mbempiri. Chambeshi River, from its origin in Kasama, avoids hills for it to reach the ocean. Dondolo Musuma. And so some silence is strategic. I end there.
Some silence is strategic. It's strategic in a very worrying manner, because from the announcement that there's going to be a formation of UCA, where your party will belong to, and different other political parties, but also the moment Mwansa took over the PF, as a party, you're one of the people that have been quiet, and people have been wondering, which side are you on, Mwansa side or President Edgar Lungu's side?
Well, I'm a member of parliament representing the people of Mwansa Central on the PF ticket, and I remain as such. And for today, that's who I am. My pursuit for leadership in the Patriotic Front Party remains unabated, and a time cometh when we shall have a conference where leadership shall be contested, and I shall contest the leadership of the Patriotic Front Party.
Which side are you on? President Edgar Lungu's side or President Mwansa's side?
I am on the side of the people. I am a member of Parliament for Mwansa Central and under the Patriotic Front Party.
Which Patriotic Front?
The Patriotic Front Party.
The one that Mwansa belongs to?
The Patriotic Front Party.
You've been so quiet on the formation of UCA. What is your thoughts on the formation of UCA? I know for a fact that hasn't been registered yet, but you've been so quiet, Doc.
Well, I am of the view that the Patriotic Front Party needs to put its house in order and thereafter seek alliances with other partners. And I'll end there.
Dr. Kaunda, 2021, dies. Obviously, this was big news for Zambia. Later on, we did see President Edgar Lungu declare his death as a national and public holiday, which falls on his birthday, the 28th of April, which is today. He was born in 1914. Let's begin from there, perhaps, as we discuss his legacy. Why was this day important, especially at the time that you were in government when it was set aside to be for us to remember Dr. Kenneth Kaunda?
Well, thank you, Andrew, for that very important question. But before we delve into Dr. Kaunda, remember that this period also coincides with the time that we lost the gallant KK-11, the fallen heroes, our footballers who died in a tragic plane crash. Let me begin by honoring them, the true heroes of this country, and may their souls continue to rest in peace. The day that we are commemorating, that of Dr. Kaunda, is a day of epic significance. Dr. Kaunda left us a very strong legacy of national unity and national identity. And so it was very important that in addition to naming infrastructure after him, having many other activities named after him, that we identify a day where we celebrate his legacy. And that's the significance of this day.
We've seen countries like South Africa, Kenya, and when it comes to the day that they remember their first Republican president, their founding fathers, there's so much activity that happened. But also in South Africa, just here, our neighbors in South Africa, Dr. Chitalu Chilufya, the way they consider Mandela, they consider him as if though he was a god. Do you think we've done enough as a country to ensure that the legacy of President Kaunda does live on hundreds years to come?
First of all, let me begin by saying that Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, rest his soul in peace, left us a crystal clear legacy that the pursuit of power is not an end in itself, but is a competition to serve. He made it ultra clear that at the center of all political contestation, the pursuit of the greatest good for the majority must be pursued. And therefore, our subscription to unitarianism is extremely important. Unitarianism focuses on ensuring that you do good for humanity. Dr. Kaunda was a subscriber to that basic principle. Service to humanity must transcend all that we do. That's the legacy he left us. In my work as a doctor, this principle applies significantly. So we must remember Dr. Kaunda as the glue that bound, that held the country together, that held the 73 ethnic groupings together. We must remember Dr. Kaunda as a man who pushed for national identity. He transcended boundaries of race, tribe, region. So Dr. Kaunda must be remembered within Zambia and beyond, because he was not only an ardent advocate of national liberation, but went beyond to supporting or advocating for liberation of other people within other jurisdictions. And so I must state here today that we're remembering a man who was not only a freedom fighter, but a man who transcended boundaries in the pursuit of brotherhood.
You mentioned something that is very key, Doc, that he was a glue that held us together as a country, held all the ethnic groupings together. And that's the reason for why today we speak of one Zambia, one nation. Do you think this legacy that you're talking about that Dr. Kaunda, lives with, could be spoken of our leaders today, that they've held this country like a glue and all of us are together?
Well, I must begin by saying that in this dispensation, we see some hyper-consciousness to our ethnicity. That must be frowned upon. The rancor and perpetual partisan contestations only serve to harm our people and not to unite them. Let us retreat and embrace the basic ethos and principles that Dr. Kaunda and comrades of his generation of the struggle advocated for or stood for. It's important that we cease to be prisoners of geography, the geography that is defined by tribe, mountains, and rivers. We must embrace the basic principles that our forefathers stood for and ensure that we pursue unity as a foundation for our nation.
Most of you that lived under Dr. Kaunda's time, you boast of complete free education, affordable healthcare system, and all these things that you talk about when you are narrating these things to us that came after, Dr. Kaunda. Paint to us a picture of the legacy that he leaves behind when you talk about the education system and the health sector in our country.
Well, Dr. Kaunda and his comrades realized that the foundation of a stable economy and country lay in a healthy population and an enlightened people. So these two fundamentals, education and health, were very critical to that group or that cohort of our leadership. So they made it a principle to make that two, health and education, universally free to our people, universally accessible to our people. They invested in infrastructure expansion to increase access to education and access to health. And we saw the deliverables today as we pursue the global agenda for universal health coverage or health for everyone everywhere. We must remember that was the principle of our founding fathers. Dr. Kaunda and his colleagues, Simon Mwansa and others, believed that a stable economy and country anchored on a healthy and enlightened population. It's for that reason that in their national development plans, they prioritized health and education. The people had to have access to health services closer to where they stayed, primary health care services, and even within reasonable distance to hospitals when they are referred. And it was a principle that Dr. Kaunda and his colleagues adopted, that every child should have access to education. Remember, one of the famous quotes that we hear about Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, or we read about Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, is that every child in Africa must have access to education and health care, and that the dignity of our people in Africa lay in their ability to access education and health. And therefore, the founding fathers, Dr. Kaunda and his comrades of the struggle, were very categorical about what they stood for. I was born in the Kaunda era. I was educated in the Kaunda era. I am a product of the universal free education and health services of the time. And today, as we talk about transforming our health systems, responding to the boom in the population, and also to contemporary matters such as healthcare financing, such as new trends in supply chain, public health security, we should always remember and have recourse to the grounding principles our forefathers left for us, that every citizen in Zambia must have access to health, and that when they're healthy, there will be an opportunity for them to get education.
How did Kaunda and his comrades really, get this right? Education, health, very important, aspects of our development, especially when you look at when we're looking at a country developing. How did they get the mathematics right, Doc?
Well, they were selfless, they were visionary, and they were transformational. At the time that Dr. Kaunda and his team or his cohort, of comrades took over leadership in the country in 1964, there were just about 100 graduates at university level, probably around 1,200 people with certificates, full secondary school certificates. They also knew that for them to develop the nation, they needed to build a critical mass of leaders in various sectors: agriculture, education, and many other productive areas of the economy. So they were futuristic, they were visionary and transformational. And if you look at their investments, apart from investing in primary healthcare infrastructure, in primary infrastructure for education, they invested in the University of Zambia, and a number of graduates the number of graduates in the country improved. I am a product of the University of Zambia. Many of my colleagues in cohort are products of the University of Zambia. We are his legacy. So you could tell their futuristic, selfless, transformational, and visionary approach to developing the nation. And like I said earlier, those two fundamentals, health and education, are the basis of a stable economy and a developed nation.
1991, a new government comes in, the movement for multi-party democracy, but I don't want you to speak for the movement for multi-party democracy. I want you to speak for the government that came in after the MMD. 2011, you take over power as a patriotic front. What did you do to ensure that the legacy of Kaunda lived on?
Well, we embarked on a transformational agenda to ensure that universal health coverage was pitched as high priority. So we therefore embarked on a program to ensure access to health services was enhanced by building infrastructure at primary healthcare level. We envisioned 500 healthcare facilities. We built probably more than 650 healthcare facilities at primary healthcare level. We envisioned 6 specialist hospitals to curb treatment abroad costs, and we built the 6 specialist hospitals. We have Chinsali, we have Petauke, we have Maina Soko, Lusaka Heart Hospital, and we transformed the University Teaching Hospital, broke it down into 5 distinct specialist hospitals, and they're very efficient today. The Women and Newborn Hospital, the pediatric hospital, we have the adult section, we have the eye hospital, we have the cancer diseases hospital. So we moved in to ensure that service delivery was pitched high priority in our health system, strengthening. Beyond that, we emphasized the need for human capital for health. That's the reason we planned to recruit 30,000 health workers. By 2021, we had already recruited 25,000 health workers. This was to increase the hands that were available at frontline level to provide health services.
Is this the period from 2011?
This was just 2016 to 2021. If we include the period 2011 to 2016, we've recruited way beyond 30,000. I am referring to the strategic plan 2017 to 2021, which had a vision for universal health coverage with 10 legacy goals. And on human capital, the legacy goal was to recruit 30,000 health workers. And within that 5-year period, we recruited 25,000 health workers. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm not even talking about the period between 2011 and 2021. I'm talking about 2016 to 2021, where we completed more than 40 district hospitals, built more than 650 primary health care facilities, 99 mini hospitals,
sorry, Doc,
6 specialist
sorry to hold you there. I think the reason why I ask, when you recruited these health workers is because those in government critically say that there was employment freeze and there was no health workers that were employed.
Well, indicators don't lie, and if you get into the Ministry of Health...
And they go there to argue that perhaps maybe Dr. Chitalu Chilufya was employing these people privately because we didn't see any
not at all
announcement being made from government that there's employment
not
of
at
health
all.
workers.
Andrew, I can tell you that in 2016, when I was privileged to be appointed Minister of Health, the Minister of Finance was Honorable Felix Mtati, the current Minister of Technology and Science. And I had a meeting with him, and I told him the priorities that we had in the health sector, and he was extremely supportive. And in the first year, he allowed us to recruit close to 10,000 health workers. And in the second year... Did
you make these jobs public to the entire general public?
In fact, I will tell you that in year 1, we mopped the street of everybody called a health worker. We recruited nurses, physiotherapists, laboratory scientists,
And there were adverts for these recruitments?
Oh, yes. And what we focused on was we looked at the database. We had close to 10,000 health workers that had no jobs but were qualified. And in that year, we mopped the streets of all workers who had qualified and had not had the ability to be employed. Before 2016, we'd be recruiting 500 health workers per year. In 2016, 2017, it was the first time we moved from an average of 500 to 700 to 10,000. Why? We noticed that in order for us to strengthen our health systems and push the agenda for health for everyone, we needed to address the issue of human capital. And we were also conscious of the fact that there were many qualified nurses and other paramedics who were on the street without jobs because of insufficient Treasury Authority year in, year out. That's why the year 2016 to 2017 was a transformational year where the Minister of Health worked closely with the Minister of Finance to ensure that we recruited enough members of staff. By the way, because of that recruitment that happened in 2016-2017, there was motivation by the private sector. One, to expand enrollment, to even ensure that more people enroll and graduate from their institutions. Today, we have a lot more people who have qualified from the private sector led training institutions, even from the government-led training institutions. What we need to do is come up with an agenda to recruit all of them within the public sector and the private sector. We need to be visionary and transformational. We know that the Treasury may not support uptake of all these graduates in 1 year, but we need to forge partnerships with the private sector. We need to be innovative. We will look at export of human capital if we feel saturated. But I must emphasize that the pursuit of universal health coverage summons us to address the aspect of human capital. We've trained enough human capital. We must seek enough resources to recruit them in the public sector and in the private sector. We must also forge partnerships with other corporations to ensure that this human capital is absorbed. Let us not frustrate the efforts of both the government institutions and the private institutions. And as I talk about this, I'm not just talking about educating health workers. I'm talking about quality education for health workers.
I want to pick your thoughts on your thoughts on how the health sector under this administration is currently running. I didn't ask you a question on education, because when you came into office as the Patriotic Front, one of the things that you did was to scrap off meal allowances, from University of Zambia students as well as Copperbelt University students. The UPND comes, in office, introduce free education, reintroduce again, meal allowances for both university students at CBU and at UNZA. On top of that, they employ thousands of health workers. I want to pick your thoughts, especially, building on to the fact that Kaunda had this vision, took the education sector and the health sector as pillars for national development.
Well, Andrew, I want to make sure that this conversation does not deteriorate into a political, discourse. This is a very important day, and we're honoring Dr. Kaunda's legacy. And like I said earlier on, Dr. Kaunda and his comrades of the struggle identified health and education as two critical fundamentals to push their agenda for a dignified nation, for a stable economy, for a country that could proudly stand as an independent nation. And therefore today I would like to emphasize that we need to usher in a new dispensation of politics where we build on the gains of the previous governments. We need to depart from the era where we promote rancor and perpetual partisan contestations that just harm our people and distract them from the trajectory for development. It's important that we unite our people and keep them focused on what matters. KK understood the importance of unity. That's why I reiterate, he was the glue that bind the 73 ethnic tribes together. KK promoted inclusivity and ensured that in all that he did and said, he transcended beyond these boundaries of tribe, race, ethnicity, religion. This is what we need to get back to today. That we see a lot of our people in the country being hyper-conscious of their ethnic background is retrogressive. We must retreat and embrace the ethos and principles.
Should we be happy
that Kaunda and his
what we saw many years ago is happening under this administration?
So I want to tell you this. Free education, universal access to education and health was a basic principle that Kaunda and his team adopted, and the deliverables are there today. I am a product. I know that Andrew, you were born yesterday, you probably may not have been there, but let me tell you, we went to primary school and we didn't have to pay. We went to secondary school and we went to university. There was some minimum cost sharing, but the prohibitive tuition fees that we hear of today were not there those days. Of course, we had a very small amount of graduates at the time of independence, and we had to change with the times. Today we have grown the number of graduates, the number of people accessing education, and there are parameters that we need to adjust to suit the moment and to fit within the times. But I agree with you that Kenneth Kaunda and his cohorts promoted universal access to education and to health. And that the government of today is promoting free education is something that should be commended. During the PF regime, we advocated for abolition of out-of-pocket payments for healthcare services. That's the reason why we established the National Health Insurance Management Authority. That must be built on. We advocated for quality education by expanding infrastructure to education. And we made sure that we upgraded the number of secondary schools to increase access to secondary education. That must be built on. A change in government does not mean rewriting the will. We must have broad national consensus on fundamental parameters, and we must build on these. We must not lose institutional memory. Our founding father, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, with his cohorts, came up with national development plans. They were very thorough. They looked at key thrusts: education, health. They looked at infrastructure. They looked at many, many aspects that would promote the interests of the nation. The MMD government came into power and introduced multipartism. The Patriotic Front Party came into power and they did build, on a number of aspects in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of infrastructure. The UPND are in power. Let's build on what was started by Kenneth Kaunda, carried on by the MMD, the Patriotic Front Party, and now by the UPND. It should be about the pursuit of the greatest good for the majority of people. It should be about service to the people.
One of the things that you've consistently mentioned is we need to learn from Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. I'd like to find out from you, Doc, what personal qualities and attributes made Kaunda an effective leader and statesman.
Well, first of all, he was selfless. He was visionary. He was bold. And he navigated the complexities of national and international politics very skillfully, but ensuring that national interests were promoted. Look, I've spoken about Dr. Kenneth Kaunda on the a local level. Look, there are times that you'd hear highly transformational moments, the Mulungushi reforms. Where Dr. Kaunda made strategic economic pronouncements that changed the trajectory of the country. You looked at the period when all of us would appreciate that and made sure that our natural resources were translating into wealth and benefit for the people of the country. That is a learning point. Made sure that there was industrialization, and we established a number of manufacturing industries to reduce import dependence. There are a number of transformational moves Dr. Kenneth Kaunda embarked on. Of course, he did run into trouble at some point with the management of the economy and with the perpetuation of the one-party state. And that's why I'm saying we should look at the period of the MMD government critical as a period when multipartism was introduced and when liberalization of the economy was done, and the pros and cons a discussion for another day. But we should also appreciate the patriotism that President Sata and his team brought up, and the transformational agenda that he came up with. The UPND today must continue on the agenda and the basic principles that Dr. Kaunda and his friends of the struggle set up: national development, service to the people, pursuit of the greater good, public service, and unity.
You speak of the manufacturing industries at present. Kenneth Kaunda did put up almost in all the countries. We speak about different manufacturing industries that were there in Kabwe, in Lusaka, in Chinsali, and many other places. Doc, what went wrong in terms of building on those industries and those manufacturing industries that were set up?
Well, look,
because even today we say that, look, the times of Kaunda, we had all these manufacturing industries. What went wrong, Doc?
Well, It's a whole complete different, conversation. You know that when during the Kaunda era, we set up manufacturing industries as part of coming up with local solutions to the challenges that we had. We had a manufacturing plant for bicycles in Chipata, battery manufacturing in Mwansa. We had Mwenilunga doing pineapples, Monushi in Lopula again doing, bananas. Livingstone was assembling motor vehicles. We had drugs production at Gama in Ndola. All these were strategic investments. Of course, we did run into challenges in managing these institutions, and there came a time when there was justification, or there were arguments for them to be privatized. And in my view, Zambia needed to manage that process or that period very well to protect its interests. Where we are today is that we've ceded control of a number of these projects to either foreigners, or these projects have completely, stalled. We need to embark on another revolutionary industrialization program to ensure that we establish manufacturing industries and be able to have, or be able to create an opportunity to create jobs for our people, and also become less import dependent. There is an urgent need for us to have a fourth industrial revolution in the country. Zambia is endowed with natural resources. There is need for us to be transformational, visionary, and innovative to translate our natural resources into wealth and distribute it to our people. We have adequate mineral resources, land, water, our weather is conducive, and we must be able to translate this into wealth for our people. Zambia could be the food basket for the region and beyond. We've got enough land. We've got water. About 40% of the body of water in SADC is within Zambia. We have reasonable rainfall. Even within the context of the climate change, we have regions in the country that have adequate rainfall. We have the human capital. We should mechanize our agriculture, increase our food production, and be able to be sufficient, food secure as a nation, and be able to supply the region and beyond. It requires a broader consensus as a people. Let's focus on partisan wrangles and agreeing on a common agenda that promotes the interests of our people, uplifting our people from poverty. That's the reason I am saying Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and his colleagues of the struggle ascribed to this very important agenda of nation building, economic reconstruction. We need to build on what they started, and we should rise above bipartisan, we should rise above partisan wrangles and look at the common interests of the Zambian people.
I personally have been hearing what you're saying from the time I was in grade 5, Dr. Chitalu Chilufya, of the fact that Zambia has got immense mineral resources that, are able to remove this country out of the economic doldrums that we're currently in. Presidents come, presidents go, and every time you politicians are talking about the mineral resources, you tell us about the potential that they have, to ensure that we come out of this poverty. But when you come into office, it's a different conversation. Why don't we use these resources prudently to ensure that
our long-term development agenda need to be informed by broad consensus, and they need to transcend the periods that parties govern the nation. We must ensure that we have a long-term strategic plan on translating our wealth, our natural resources, into wealth. And so I am saying here today that we have the imperative, we are summoned to the table across the partisan divide to ensure that we come up with a consensus, a very broad consensus on how we translate our natural resources into wealth. The Vision 2030 must be a bipartisan document. We must look at the bigger picture. Yes, you've been hearing this
Seems like it's easier
for
said
many
than
years,
done.
but I want to tell you that we need to continue building on a leadership that is selfless and that is visionary and that is focused on uplifting the people out of their poverty. This is beyond politics, and that's the reason why I do not encourage that we spend a lot of time on partisan contestations that distract us from the development trajectory. We've got the ability to sit together and look at the common agenda, pursuit of public good for the Zambian people.
How did Dr. Kenneth Kaunda's presidency shape the country's foreign policy and international relations?
Well, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda understood that brotherhood transcended the sovereignty of nations. He therefore pursued liberation of nations in the region and beyond. He provided sanctuary to individuals who were managing liberation movements in the region and beyond. So Dr. Kaunda was a Pan-Africanist. He was an ally of Kwame Nkrumah, who is known as the father of Pan-Africanism, and he pursued Pan-Africanism to the core. Dr. Kenneth Kaunda worked tirelessly to build strong common ground to liberate countries in the region and beyond. Like I said, in providing logistical support and sanctuary to leaders and other liberation movements in the region, we saw liberation of countries in Namibia, Zimbabwe, South Africa. We saw Dr. Kaunda as a very strong leader in regional groupings such as the Organization of African Unity, the precursor to the African Union. And he played key leadership roles. He promoted unity, solidarity, and cooperation among African nations to solve common African problems. But he said clearly that Africa was not free until every African was free. And therefore, he did invest heavily in ensuring that liberation of countries in the region and beyond was achieved. Beyond that, Dr. Kaunda was a prominent mediator in many conflicts in the region and beyond. In Mozambique and Angola, he contributed to the ending of violence and promoting of peace and stability in the region. So Dr. Kaunda was skillful in his diplomacy, very influential, and he did participate in the region and beyond to ensure peace and stability.
I'd like to maybe draw this conversation to our diplomatic, credentials under the UNIP. Now we speak of the fact that Zambia has, abandoned its way of being non-aligned, as prescribed by the first government of Dr. Kaunda. I want you to speak, to speak to that on how we've been moving, with the principle of non-alignment, especially when we're dealing with, with our global, relations, with other countries. As you answer that, Doc, the phone lines are open. Come through and give us your contributions regarding the topic that we have on the table tonight. The number is on your screen, and later on I'll be reading some of the messages that you're sending on our social media platform.
Well, Dr. Kaunda reigned at the pinnacle, of the Cold War that pitted two strong global powers, the capitalist United States of America then, and the socialist USSR. And Dr. Kaunda belonged to the non-aligned movement that sought to promote the interests of developing nations at the hilt of that power rivalry. And the non-aligned movement fought for liberation of African countries and also sought to protect the interests of developing countries as that power rivalry, progressed. So Zambia has been known traditionally to be non-aligned, and I'll not be judgmental, but I'll just state that the policy that we have preserved in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and at the State House level has been that of non-alignment. We are not enemies of China, neither are the enemies of China our enemies. We're not enemies of the United States, neither are the enemies of the United States our enemies, but we remain non-aligned, and that's what we have been from the time that Dr. Kaunda, was head of state.
Could you say that you're proud of Zambia, today, to hear that, for example, President Hakainde Hichilema, being part of the people that presided over, the ongoing war between, Russia and Ukraine, and he was part of the delegates of the African heads of states that went to preside over this matter?
That's who we have been as a nation, and I am an advocate of progressive politics, and if a leader in power does something that is progressive and that is in alignment with our common beliefs as a nation, he deserves to be commended. So definitely that was a plus for the country.
Let me quickly read some of the messages that are coming on social media as I pick some calls. Dr. Chilufya, where and when did you employ 2,500 health workers? Surely, are you still lined up until today? That there was employment freeze under your government. Maybe you can respond to that as I look at some messages again.
Well, I'll just encourage our colleague there to read and to research. Indicators in the health sector don't lie. So it's very easy to just go into the database, check what numbers were recruited in 2011, 2012, 2013, and the like. So he could be better informed. I'll just encourage him to be a little bit more focused on researching and not just to say things out of ignorance.
Why weren't you? Why didn't you see it fit to publicize some of these numbers?
Work speak for yourselves. Work speaks for you. And if you want to be very loud about what you have done, you've probably done very little. But what you do will speak for itself. Look, for us to build 650 health posts, 100 mini hospitals, 6 specialist hospitals, and operationalize them, it required human resource. So where did this come from? We had to recruit. So you should just go to the database. And even the recruitment that is happening today, I must state that it's commendable, but it's insufficient to drive our agenda for universal health coverage. We need sufficient resourcing for human capital as a component of a strong health system. And I am saying in 2016, 2017, in our first year of the National Strategic Plan, we recruited close to 10,000 health workers. That is not in dispute. It is on record. And you must just check the health information management systems, and it will show you. You see, let's not run the health sector based on propaganda. Let's not claim things that don't exist. We must be factual, and we can be backed by indicators. Numbers don't lie.
Let's speak of
so let's not debate issues of indicators. Let's look at the facts and then debate them thereafter.
Let's speak of first caller. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on Costa tonight. Langford Mbewe. Langford Mbewe, good evening. We seem to have lost that caller, but do come through with the number that is on your screen. And I'm also reading some of the messages, on our social media. Another message on our social media, Doc, is in relation to the question that I asked around free education. Webi Mtanga says, the Doc is running away from the question. What is his thought? PF scrapped off meal allowances, UPND reinstated it, same as bursary. I think it was at the time that we were talking about the two pillars, a health system and the education system. You said you ran away from the principle that Dr. Kaunda, did establish of ensuring that there's accessible and free education for all.
Well, I said, and I'll repeat, that Dr. Kaunda and his cohort did realize the importance of these two fundamentals, health and education, and embarked on a program to ensure universal access to health and to education. And they posted their achievements, and we are the deliverables. The dynamics at the time are not the same today, and we must ensure that we look at the parameters of the day and ensure that decisions are made as such. I support the government's agenda to support free education. I support the government's agenda to ensure continuity in solidarity in providing health services. I don't politic about this. Education and health should be above, politics. And so I don't want to look at this health and education thing as being a contestation between parties. This is a national agenda. And our forefathers, Dr. Kaunda, who we are honoring today, did lay the foundation. He did recognize the importance of health and education in building a stable country and economy. And his investment resulted in so many on what this society is all about today. And what is important is that every incumbent government must build on that foundation. And if there are errors made in any particular area, that must be corrected. The reason we pursue our interests, or the reason we pursue political power, is to ensure that we address.
Let's speak to Alec. Alec, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on COSA tonight. Alec?
Hello?
Go ahead with your contribution or question.
Good evening, Doctor.
Alec, good evening.
Yeah, I just want to find out what contribution would the hospital, which is now pending, the cancer hospital, would have made to Zambia. Can you speak about that?
Did you get the question?
Which pending hospital?
Ask your question again, Alec.
I'm saying, can the doctor say a bit what the Zambians are missing if the cancer hospital was opened?
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Alec, for coming through. Just about your thoughts on the cancer disease hospital. Valentine's also, Charlie says, what is his view on the academic standard of medical students with the mushrooming of private institutions who have medical students who do not have full grade 12 certificates? But as you respond to the, we have a number of people dying, annually in our country as a result of not getting treatment. The dying out of cancer because there's no enough investment in the cancer disease hospital.
Well, I'll be broad in my response. Non-communicable diseases today form a very ferocious epidemic challenging the health of our people in the country. And cancers happen to be one of them. And today, cancers claim the lives of many people who are otherwise should be productive. We have cancers ranging from cervical cancer, being the commonest, in women, breast cancer, again in women, prostate cancer in men, and other, cancers in lesser incidence. But cancers are a major public health challenge in the country today. Zambia's strategic approach to addressing this problem spans the whole continuum of care, from ensuring that people are informed or empowered with information on how to avoid cancers, on how to detect cancers early and therefore get treatment, and even those who report early, how they can access, treatment in our, facilities and get, be it rehabilitative or palliative care. Zambia has invested in a national cancer control strategy, speaking to just that. We have invested in a strong health promotion program. We've invested in a program that detects cervical cancer early, that will detect prostate cancer early. And we also have invested in the Cancer Disease Hospital to ensure that those who scrap through these preventive barriers are treated sufficiently. The Cancer Disease Hospital has been a success story for this country. Not only has it revolutionized the management of, cancer care of cancer patients, but it also has been a platform for training, not only of specialists within the country, but beyond the region, but within the region and beyond. And I must state today that the Cancer Diseases Hospital is in a very bad state. We know that the Cancer Disease Hospital today is not providing the fundamental treatment protocol, the fundamental treatment called radiotherapy. And the reason is that the equipment is, not functional. I've said this before. When you're transitioning from equipment that should be phased out to new equipment, you must ensure that the transition is seamless. Continue keeping the equipment in a functional state by regularly servicing it and ensuring that
Did you do that under your watch? Because just
yes.
in 2020, the statistics, you said numbers don't lie. In 2020, when you were in government, 8,600 people died out of cancer.
Well, you should look at the whole spectrum, and you must also look at when did we stop radiotherapy services at the Cancer Diseases Hospital. We kept Cancer Diseases Hospital functional. To the time that I left the Ministry of Health, Cancer Diseases Hospital was fully functional, and all the equipment was being serviced by a local company, and there was a service contract that was sufficiently funded. It is my considered view that suspending that service was reckless, and suspending the servicing of that equipment was reckless, and we should have ensured that we continued on the service contracts.
Who suspended
while
this?
we procured.
Who suspended?
Well, with the change of guard at the Ministry of Health, there were policies that changed, and it is my considered view that that was a reckless decision. We should have continued with servicing that equipment, keeping it in a functional state, while we embarked on procurement of modern equipment to replace.
Was the suspension done after Dr. Jonas Chanda came in, or perhaps after the UPND came in?
Well, you can do your research, but I can tell you that I left the Ministry of Health at the time that the Cancer Disease Hospital was providing radiotherapy services, chemotherapy services, and other services. And I insist that we should learn to build on what has been started. We embarked on a process of procuring equipment using loans from cooperating partners. And that process should have just been continued while you continue keeping the radiotherapy equipment functional. This is to ensure that you avoid premature deaths. This is to ensure that you provide services to the people that need radiotherapy services.
The number of people that need your opinions.
So when you when you are referring patients abroad, the numbers you refer are limited.
The number of people that want your thoughts. Valentine Charlie didn't respond to his question. What is the doc's view on the academic standard of medical students with the mushrooming of private institutions? We have medical students who do not have full grade 12 certificates. Chantry Mwemba says, Doc, how much did you do to strengthen research on herbal medicine and give it a place in our healthcare system? What should government do to strengthen this to strengthen this aspect. Theo Luhana says, what is your opinion on HPCZ exams that were brought back? Let's begin off from HPCZ exams that were brought back. Your opinion?
Well, I think the quality of medical training and the HPCZ question should be answered together. It is extremely important that we ensure quality medical education. Even as we embrace the private sector in medical training, we must ensure that the minimum standards are met. It is urgent that we have the Health Professionals Council of Zambia, the Higher Qualifications Authority, the Ministry of Higher Education, and the Ministry of Health work together to ensure that minimum standards are implemented in any institution that does medical training. Today, we must face this elephant in the room. The quality of medical education needs to be improved in our private institutions and in our government institutions. It requires collective efforts. It is dangerous not to address the quality of medical training.
How much do you
Look,
do to
HPCZ training, HPCZ exams, these are exams that are now being done after people qualify in their respective medical schools. It is another layer to ensure quality. It's important. But what is even more important is to ensure that the minimum standards of education in all the education facilities, in all the medical schools, is, are maintained. Herbal medicine has got room in our national strategic plan. And we should continue to promote research in herbal medicine and integration of herbal medicine in our practice of medicine in the country. The medicines that we use in management of malaria, chinchona-based medicines, are coming from plants, herbs. There are many, many drugs today that are synthesized from herbs, plants. So it's important that we promote research into herbal medicines and remedies. And in our strategic plan, we did emphasize on this, and there must be continuity in it.
I know you want to become the next president of this country, Dr. Chitalu Chilufya, but if the president called upon you to assist as a cabinet minister, would you agree with the position?
Well, I wish you were the president. I do not want to speculate, but all I want to tell you, all I want to refer you to is my opening statement that at the center of all contestations, political in nature, must be service to the people.
Would you offer
the
service to this country? Would you offer
of the
service to
greater
this country
good?
if the president said, Doc, please, may you assist me run?
Well, let's cross the bridge when we reach there. But what I am saying is, as politicians, we must pursue the greater good, that is service to the people. That is all we are there for. Politics should not be acrimonious. It must be a platform to compete, to serve the people better. And we must have the broadest consensus on how we could do this. That's the reason why we should transcend these partisan political boundaries to ensure we focus on the welfare of our people. Let us cease to be prisoners of geography, the geography being either tribe or political parties or mountains and rivers, and ensure that we look at our people holistically and translate our natural endowments into wealth. Ensure access to free education, access to health services, and that our people are uplifted out of poverty. Let us be transformational and visionary, and let us serve the people. That's what politics should be about. Let's abandon all this rancor and, perpetual partisan contestations that just distract us from the trajectory of development.
You're dressed like Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. As we conclude, I did see earlier on you had your handkerchief also.
It's just coincidental. My handkerchief is white, yes.
but as we conclude and as we close the program tonight, what key lessons can we learn from Dr. Kenneth Kaunda?
Well, the lessons we learn from Dr. Kenneth Kaunda is the value of leadership. Leadership must be selfless. We must be humble in serving the people. We must be visionary and ensure that we look at service to the people as the greatest good that we can do to humanity. We must ensure that we promote unity, and we must not be distracted by our partisan interests. Dr. Kenneth Kaunda should be honored by retreating to the basic ethos and principles that he and his generation of the struggle stood for: unity, service to mankind. We must look at the common endeavors, education, health, and other primary health care parameters, and we must just put service at the center of our people. And therefore, we must retreat. We must pause. We must retreat, rethink how we are managing our people, and let not the politics, partisan politics, distract us from the focus on ensuring that our people are uplifted out of poverty. And we must remember Kenneth Kaunda as the glue that binds the nation together, and we must not be associated with anything different. We must promote unity. We must rise above the prisons that bind us in the geography of tribe, tribal regions and so on and so forth. Let us be a people that work together in unity of purpose to ensure that our natural resources translate into wealth, and that Zambia becomes a prosperous and industrious nation as envisioned in the 2030 vision.
Mwansa Central lawmaker Dr. Chitalu Chilufya and former health minister, thank you so much for having made time to speak to us on Costa tonight.
Thank you very much.
We've been discussing the legacy of Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, particularly looking at his impact on the health sector. My guest has been Dr. Chitalu Chilufya, who is former health minister. My name is Andrew Mwansa. Thank you so much for hosting. See you again on Sunday at exactly 21:15.